Okay, in our continuing analysis of the Capstone Courier, we'll be moving down to the segment by segment information. So here in this example, we're looking at the traditional market segment. Let me highlight just a few key features of this report. So first, you'll see there's a total industry unit demand. So that's the total demand of traditional sensors by the entire economy. So there are 5 different product segments in the simulation. So you can think about that in terms of industries generally as different market niches. So for example, a McDonald's serves a different kind of customer than, say, an Olive Garden, which serves a different product than Ruth's Chris. So you have differences in quality and service and time to receive a meal. They differ on a lot of dimensions. And so in the simulation, you have different product niches for different kinds of sensors, and the different segments have different preferences for what things matter to them. So for example, in the traditional market, we can see that of most importance to traditional buyers are the age of the product. They want to get a product that has been tested by other buyers, that has been around for at least 2 years, and so is a known entity and is reasonably recognized. So they're sensitive to whether it's reliable and established. They also are very price sensitive relative to other sensors. So I'm reading that off this area here. So this is very important information because it tells you which type of qualities are most important to buyers in this segment. So for example, if you wanted to compete in the traditional segment, having cutting edge technology and really modern research and development practices, you're going to have a bad time because they don't in fact want cutting edge products. Traditional purchasers want products that have had some time to season. So if you're constantly improving your product, while that might be very appealing to some buyers, it's not appealing to traditional buyers. 3 here, we have something called position. So in the simulation, this represents the position on this grid here along 2 dimensions, size and performance. So if you want a very sensitive sensor that's very small, it's going to be very expensive. If you want a poor performing sensor that's large, you should expect to pay less. And so different market segments have different demands on their sensors. And so the traditional segment actually are not particularly demanding, and that they're willing to accept a large sensor with somewhat low sensitivity, whereas other product segments will want a small sensor with high sensitivity. So speaking generally, not just about the simulation, but about markets generally, some market segments in businesses are very sensitive to the nature of the product, while others are more willing to accept products that they're not necessarily happy with as long as the price is right. And so different market segments appeal to different people that way. Also important in this chart is the actual versus potential market share here, this graph. So the red bars take into account all of the various aspects of the products and shows the demand that would have materialized had all of the businesses had sufficient stock to service the demand of customers. So for example, Erie was able to achieve a superior product, which is preferred above all other products somewhat. But they weren't able to capitalize on this as well as they could have because they had a shortfall in the amount of products they had for sale. So demand was higher than expected, the inventory sold out, and since the customers couldn't get the product that they wanted, they went to competing firms and purchased that. So, for example, Erie could have sold up to this market share, but did not because they ran out, and that drove products to Ferris. So Ferris sold products in excess of their potential demand because people who would have preferred to purchase Erie ended up purchasing Ferris as a product. That information is mirrored down here, where we can see which products stocked out and which didn't, and some of the attributes of those products. So Team Erie's product Eat was the most demanded product, and as you can see, it had the highest December customer survey score and had better accessibility and awareness than the other products. This report is available for all 5 market segments, and each one has their own product lines and their own demands. In general, if we look at the top of the Courier, we have, the bottom, we have a picture of the 5 segments. Notice that in the early simulation, there is some overlap, that some products can exist both in the low segment and the traditional segment, for example. And as the simulation progresses, the demands of the customers increase. These circles drift down and to the right. They demand smaller sensors that are more sensitive, and also the tastes of the various market niches diverge somewhat so that these overlapping regions decrease in size. So each product segment, with its own products and its own demands and its own expectations, also have their own growth rates. So if we take a look at the traditional market segment, it is growing at 9% per year, whereas the low is growing faster and high is growing faster still at 16%. And so the proportion of the total market served by a particular segment will change as time passes. And so that proposes a forecasting challenge for teams wanting to sell in certain segments. So forecasting is something we will explore in a different video, and but the growth rate of the segment you're trying to forecast is significant for that. Also, here is the map. The inner circle shows the ideal region where customers are satisfied, and the outer dotted circle is basically the limits of what they're willing to tolerate. But even within the inner circle, there is spots of relative preference. And so if you're closer to the ideal spot, you'll have a better performance than being farther out. But these all represent products that consumers and businesses were willing to purchase. And so even though they weren't in the ideal, either because of shortages or unusual preferences, they did shop out in this outside region. And as you can see, as we look around, moving outside your ideal region is common, although those products tend to have much lower market share. Okay, so that is the Courier in a nutshell. So next we'll take a look at some decisions you can make based on the information in the Courier and where you input those decisions into the Capstone software.